Hello folks, it's me, DeMontropolis, and today I'm looking at a sequel nobody expected to see come to fruition. Mega Man 3, The Robots Are Revolting, for the DOS computer, released in 1992. Admittedly, this game started out as a guilty pleasure of mine, and as you can see with the title of this video, I really wanted to like this game. Now, I will not go into detail about how this game came to be. I'm not that kind of fellow. There's already folks out there who live and breathe this game's radioactive DNA, and some have even went out of their way to reverse engineer quite literally every pixel that Mega Man swims through. To make a long story short, I will give a general rundown. Like its predecessor, this game was also developed by Rosner Labs, though the single developer there managed to get his brother on board. Oddly enough, the game started out as an unrelated project called Eco Man. You played as a character in a hazmat suit, exploring polluted lands and wasted environments. When the game was brought to the publisher, High Tech Expressions, they told Rosner the game would only be published if it was reskinned into a Mega Man game to appeal to more buyers. Sounds pretty dumb, right? Thus, Rosner Labs was roped back into Capcom for one last project, leaving the game with its environmental theme and hodgepodging the rest of the core Mega Man mechanics together. The character of Eco Man would be kept in-game and repurposed as a recurring enemy I like to call Hazmat Joe. So without further ado, let's take a deep, critical look at Mega Man DOS3. Right away, you will notice that DOS3 has a somehow worse technical performance than DOS1. With DOS1, the game had a very quick pace to it, and despite the rough shortcomings, I never felt like I was waiting too long for anything. Cue in DOS3 taking over a minute to load the title screen, going off my preferred CPU speed. When it comes to DOS3, it primarily involves the stage select. Moving from mugshot to mugshot has a huge delay to it and feels really cumbersome. Even after selecting stages, I find myself waiting at least 10 seconds for the stage to load, with no transition in between. When the Wily stage opens up, the performance is so bad it actually gets in the way of the presentation. There's an outside shot of the Wily Castle, but more often than not, I accidentally skip this scene and instantly go into the stage. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, even just pressing the button once does nothing to stop the instant skip. It's a miracle I was able to capture it in my recording, because actually seeing this stay on screen for more than half a second is rare footage to me. Since there is no intro stage, you are brought right to a stage select of 6 Robot Masters. The quality and sprite work is somehow even worse here. The Robot Masters directly rip off mugshot poses from Mega Man 2 and 3, resulting in them having 2 similar designs that unfortunately don't live up to the originals or stand out on their own in any way. Going into a stage, DOS3 will be happy to introduce you to the inbred hillbillies that make up the enemy design. The mutated theme makes for bizarre patterns and a lot of weird designs, but weird in a way that catches your attention. There are flying bee scorpions, spider snakes, walking plants, snail bats, and more. The bee scorpions are tricky enemies with how they set up their charge attacks, and the crab clams are kinda terrifying with the way their silhouette animates, popping out of nowhere in the silent void that is DOS level design. There's also the Hazmat Joes. They're pretty common across the game, but always manage to keep you on your toes, shooting immediately upon detecting you. The only enemy that actually sucks is the sea anemone. Only found in the water, these enemies are very low to the ground and spawn a homing fish that cannot be killed. They only appear a few times in the water stages, but one of them is in your way and the other guards an E-Tank in Shark Man stage in a very enclosed spot. You're pretty much bound to take damage if you stumble upon it. Awful enemy. One cool thing about the enemies is that the Mets and Sniper Joes from DOS1 are more commonplace throughout, appearing in almost every stage. Their patterns have been tweaked a little bit, but their continued presence across each stage makes DOS3 feel a little bit more like a Mega Man game than DOS1. The Mets suck though. They have the same shoot pattern, but for some reason they were given 12 HP, the tankiest enemy by a huge margin, and their shot patterns don't give you much leeway to pump in damage. Thankfully they die in 2 hits to Water Shooter, but without that, the enemy takes way too long to kill. Controls are pretty much the same as in DOS1, but what's baffling is that there's no slide. I'm not one to write up cons for what video games don't do, but DOS3 is specifically ripping off NES Mega Man 3. Its box art and title screen don't even paste the signature subtitle of "The Robots Are Revolting." The only reason why the game is called DOS3 instead of DOS2 was because Bitman had a big resemblance to Sparkman's depiction on the NES box art. Speaking of which, this game tried so hard to fool people into thinking this game is Mega Man 3 on NES just ported to DOS, when in reality, it's a completely different game. The same box art, same name, and promoted the same way. There's no confidence in displaying the fact that this game is fully original from any other Mega Man experience, and that's a shame. One of the unique bits about DOS3 is the incorporation of swimming controls. Instead of jumping high, Mega Man is fully locked into freely swimming around, and these underwater controls are really drifty. You can't turn on a dime, instead sliding around a bit before changing direction. Mega Man also gets launched upwards when he's hurt. It may or may not be beneficial depending on where you're trying to go, but for the most part, underwater gameplay only amounts to just bumping into everything on accident. I will give the game this. The way stages are set up is generally done really well. Easily the best part about this game's execution. Stage aesthetics are more fleshed out and clearly tell an environmental story. Underwater areas like Blade Man stage have all these toxic barrels and biohazards lying around, while the more industrial areas are stacked with oil canisters. Some of the stages even have assets shared amongst each other. You could dismiss this as lazy, but to me it gave the feeling that these stages were inherently connected to each other. Torchman stage is a sewer full of water rushing around, and the last bit of Oilman stage had a similar sewer, but with oil instead. One minor detail I like is that the boss gates are replaced with pressure doors opened by valves. It gives the stages a bit of that DOS 1 realism. Some stages are also mapped out to be exactly in the shape of what they are, and using that as a basis for stage design is always impressive to see. Waveman stage is a massive tanker. You bore the very top of it and snake your way around the general shape of the ship until you go down an escape hatch under the ship. Oilman has these tall towers you jump across, and Wily stage has the exact same design as the castle from the outside, going through red, pink, blue, green, and gray areas. It's all really cool, and I suggest looking at the stage maps online to see the full picture for yourself. The stage theming is very interesting too. It's stuff that you don't really see anywhere else in the Mega Man series, or at the very least, they aren't that common. Bitman has a giant oil rig in the sky, and I find the inclusion of this random jump sign darkly amusing. Blade Man has a hydroelectric dam, and the sewers in Torchman are directly under a peaceful neighborhood. Sharkman is probably the most inspired theming, a sunken ship buried within a vast complex of paths hiding below the ocean floor. In terms of level design, Mega Man DOS3 makes it distinct from nearly every other game in the series with its massive open levels. These places are huge, and while there is one general path to take through the level, the number of alternate routes and dead ends there are is something I have always appreciated. These levels also follow a rule of having at least one E-Tank and or 1-up to find in them, and some of these are tucked away in very good spots. Torchman has good placements for both, while Blademan tucks his 2 E-Tanks and 1-up away in reasonable areas that you would eventually come across on your own. However, a couple E-Tanks have some terrible placements. Bitman's E-Tank is placed on top of this girder near the end of the stage. You'd think you can reach it from the bottom, but that is not possible as there is a ceiling to bonk you down. There's instead a fake wall hidden in a stack of oil barrels directly above the E-Tank, and the only indication of this is that your shots go through these oil barrels. Normally, buster shots do not pass through walls in DOS3. Also, my friend Max spoiled me on how to get that E-Tank instead of letting me find it for myself, and I definitely would have found it on my own, so fuck you, Max. Waveman's E-Tank is much more feasible, but the graphics of the red background had me convinced they were solid, not something you could walk through until it was pointed out to me that you actually could. For navigation, you aren't just going in one direction, expecting the exit to be in front of you. Instead, You'll be going in nearly every possible direction, and I found it really fun to explore as much as possible when I first played this game. I still remember the first day I streamed my blind playthrough in DeMontropolis. The folks in VC were surprised to see me actually tolerating the experience, dare I say, even enjoying it. That is not to say it is flawless though, and it might be DOS3's biggest turnoff for many. If you're not good at exploration or finding your way through the scenery, the open layouts can be very overwhelming and potentially frustrating if you're just bumping into dead end after dead end. This naturally makes the already long levels even longer, and my first playthrough took over 2 to 3 hours to complete. I've also found on replays that there's no incentive to continuously explore levels other than finding 1-ups and E-tanks. The only other goodie that stages can provide is big health pickups, and they are very abundant across each stage. That and the amount of E-tanks you can get makes these big health pickups not worth going after. Honestly, this game would have really benefited with having a shop system and making most of these health pickups big bolts instead. I know the game predates Mega Man GB4, which was the first game to introduce the shop, but it's still cool to think about. There are many areas with dull hallways that you just walk through or swim through. When there's a lack of enemy combat or gimmick to evade, you aren't really being involved in the gameplay loop, just going down a straight hallway or a long ladder. The swimming stages are a primary example of just dead air. Either you're not being engaged in the game, or you're just going past everything. Tough to find exceptions to this. Generally, this is a very boring game at the end of the day. The levels are fun to explore, but they don't have any well-crafted challenges that test your platforming abilities as a blue bomber. There's many more factors I'll touch upon later, but it generally feels like the stages got caught up in style over substance. It's one of the reasons why Mega Man DOS3 has almost no replay value, the exact opposite of DOS1 in this regard. In being a much longer game with a very loose focus, most players, including myself, are not itching to get back into the game and learn more. Until I was able to fully learn the levels and beat the game in under an hour consistently, I was not looking forward to my replays. There's also no save system for what amounts to a much longer game compared to DOS1. On my blind playthrough, stages on average took over 10 to 15 minutes each at least, somewhere around that. And for stages to be that long, you kinda need a save system to give yourself a break. It's unreasonable for the game to really expect players to beat the entire thing in one sitting or reset the game if they don't. In terms of difficulty, DOS3 is a generally very easy time as enemies do baby bites of damage all around. Almost everything hits for 2 damage, and Mega Man has 32 HP in the DOS games. The highest damage you can take is 8 damage from Hazmat Joe contact, while the slower enemies can do 4 damage. Logistically speaking, you are almost never in danger of dying from damage unless you are deliberately playing recklessly. An interesting juxtaposition to this is the presence of very cramped hallways where damage feels almost inevitable. The damage is very low, but trying to avoid damage requires an unnaturally tight jump or movement through the water, and the looser physics just don't allow for this to be done consistently. Not enjoyable whatsoever. I also notice a lot of enemies that have a similar grounded pattern of just walking back and forth along the ground. Some of them are more aggressive with charge-up attacks or projectiles, but a lot of these enemies are only different by design, behaving identically for the most part. Just like DOS1, there's no artwork whatsoever for bosses and enemies. Admittedly, this game would have been the more interesting of the 2 DOS games to actually have that concept art available, going off the basis that it originally wasn't supposed to be a Mega Man game at all. The mutated designs and robot masters would have also benefited from having more detailed artwork of what they look like, instead of going off the amateurish art style that leaves room for abstract interpretation. In addition to feeling dull, the stages have some frustrating elements to them. The most common source of these is background turrets, a gimmick brought over from DOS1 and given an extra variant. You can't shoot them down anymore. You instead have to dodge their omnidirectional pink balls or bouncing Gemini lasers. These lasers are very skinny and hard to notice against certain backgrounds, but in vertical sections, they can knock Mega Man down several stories worth of platforms. They don't do very much damage, but the only stage they don't appear in is Sharkman stage, as it's fully underwater. While I admit that there are some areas where they are placed very well, these turrets are everywhere. The hydraulic presses in Waveman stage that guard the E-Tank are capable of getting you stuck underneath them in an out-of-bounds way. The crush damage is not an insta-kill, but if you get stuck, it'll be very difficult to escape. I was able to get it on footage. The punishment is taking so much damage from each crush and struggling to get out of there. There were times where I had to burn E-Tanks while trying to escape. Oilman stage doesn't have anything explicitly frustrating, but there is a soft lock. On the first tower's ladder, you can jump all the way to the right and over a stack of oil barrels, getting on top of the building you were just inside. If you walk all the way right and follow down, congrats, you are 100% stuck down there and have no choice but to reset the game, and all of your progress. Blademan stage might just be the worst stage in the game. The first half is underwater and features these spinning spikes. They are stationary and do not insta-kill, but the way they are placed and positioned around each other makes them very obnoxious to weave through, and you can potentially get trapped in them for multiple hits. It really highlights how terrible the swimming controls are. If you struggle this much to get past stationary obstacles, you know it's an issue. When you climb ladders, the camera doesn't center on Mega Man, instead having him a little higher than the direct center of the camera. This means you can't fully see what's above you, and that makes it very easy to climb into an enemy or hazard that's hiding just out of bounds. This is most noticeable in Torchman stage and Bitman stage with the long ladder climbings. You climb right into a Hazmat Joe and have to climb back up after being pushed down. The boss fights with Robot Masters are very basic and lazily put together, having the exact same pattern with a few exceptions. This shared pattern consists of very slow jumps of varying distances, only shooting the boss's projectile if they come in contact with a wall. This is the case for Sharkman, Oilman, Blademan, and Torchman. It's even worse for Oilman and Torchman, as their weapons behave exactly the same. The only two who do something different are Bitman and Waveman. Bitman doesn't jump at all, instead charging back and forth after shooting off his protection. Waveman only uses his water shooter while in the air to spray projectiles all around. The interesting thing about all this is that the game's internal order for the Robot Masters reveals that Bitman is always first, confirming that his pattern was implemented before everyone else, and that the coders gave up on Oilman and recycled Sharkman's code from there. The order can be figured out using the stage select clockwise, pause menu's weapon order, and rematch order. The bosses still don't have iframes, and that allows weaknesses to trivialize the fights with no effort. Most Robot Masters will be killed as soon as they land from their first jump. DOS3 also gives these guys a lot of secondary weaknesses, so even if you don't have the primary one, most other options can still rack up big damage. This is especially true with Water Shooter and Blade Launcher, as these weapons shoot 3 projectiles at once and they will all stack the damage. The Robot Masters themselves make up one of the worst sets in any Mega Man game, and they are so insignificant that their names got stolen and repurposed for future Robot Masters later down the line. Only Bitman has yet to get his name stolen, but the rest have to share their names with Robot Masters that deliver on more fleshed out concepts overall. The Blademan in Mega Man 10 is probably the most on the nose with this. He shares the same primary purple color, and his triple blade weapon serves as a direct upgrade to Blade Launcher in every way. The weapons are generally really bad in this game. Half of them go straight and are really boring to use. Torch Arm and Oil Stream have no functional difference and have nothing to stand out from a regular Buster Shot. Bit Cannon is so slow you actually walk faster than it, and Shark Boomerang's return gets almost no use in the level design. The other two weapons, Water Shooter and Blade Launcher, generally do more damage with their multiple shots, but if you miss any of them trying to hit all 3, you'll have to wait for that missed shot to leave the screen before you can shoot again. Weapons also have the capability of doing decimal damage or even 0 damage, leading you to waste your weapon energy on one enemy trying to figure out how strong the weapon is. This is terrible, as most enemies have 5 HP or less, and being unable to handle one enemy with 1 HP worth of health is embarrassing, along with the fact that these weapons are costly. Weapon energy can only be found as enemy drops, so accidentally wasting a weapon on an enemy who resists it is never a good impression. I just stick to the buster for most of the game, with a few exceptions. The one saving grace about weapons is that enemies actually have weaknesses to certain weapons, and that encourages weapon usage to dispatch them sooner than the buster can. The Bee Scorpion dies instantly to Shark Boomerang, while Water Shooter takes out most enemies after hitting all 3 shots, or even less than 3. The Hazmat Joes die in 2 hits or less to Torch Arm and Oil Stream, and given their behavior is one of the most aggressive in the game, that extra firepower really helps out. Upon defeating all the Robot Masters, it is time for us to go to Dr. Wily's knockoff castle. However, this stage just might be my favorite in the game, since it's actually dangerous with the insta-kill acid and Hazmat Joes everywhere. This acid is unlike the lava or spikes in previous stages. It will kill you through your iframes should you get knocked into it. It's artificially tougher this way, but it does make you step back and reevaluate your approach through acid areas, especially if there are Gemini lasers or Hazmat Joes waiting to knock you into it. The 1-up in this stage is also very well hidden, rewards you for committing to a certain fall. The stage does have a soft lock of its own. It's not entirely the same as Oil Man's where it forces a reset, but it's arguably worse. After Waveman is beaten, you have to jump to the upper pressure door to go upwards. However, if you're too low when touching that door, Mega Man phases through the floor before getting pushed down to the lower area. And no, the game doesn't let you open up that lower door again, because the boss is already beaten and it never intended to let players enter a second time. This persists through all of your lives, so the only way to keep playing from here is to kill yourself over and over until you game over and reset the whole stage. This also removes all your E-tanks, by the way. At the very least, the last 2 bosses end the game off on a good note, surprisingly. Korku is back, though it isn't controlled by Dr. Wily. It instead roams the bottom floor while shooting green lasers in a spread formation, a good attack to juxtapose its slow speed. It's also weak to Bit Cannon, and it being the slowest weapon means you're encouraged to play risky if you want to kill Korku quickly. Dr. Wily's machine submerges himself in acid to hide from your shots, while glow sticks pop in and out of the floor that you stand on. Their pattern is always consistent, so paying attention to that and switching positions will keep you safe. The 2 weaknesses across both phases are well chosen too, complementing the machine's bobbing movement. It's also funny to see Dr. Wily surviving the acid without a cockpit, and then blowing up inside the acid when he dies. Unfortunately, the ending is exactly the same as DOS1's. Pancake Wily has thrown in the towel, and the only difference is the updated credits. Otherwise, this definitely comes off as a huge letdown if you jump from DOS1 to DOS3 expecting a bigger payoff for your longer journey. So in the end, I have 10 pros and 32 cons. This is probably the worst Mega Man game in the classic series. Nothing else comes to mind right now. As with the title of this video, the reason why I wanted to like this game was because of how much more ambitious the scope of the level design felt compared to DOS1. It reminded me of 2D Sonic level design in a way, and it might be the most open out of any Mega Man game. Unfortunately, there are way too many issues all around, not just on a frustrating level, but more so how undercooked everything is. All the concepts are half-baked, the mechanics are somehow even worse than in DOS1, and all in all, it's a much slower and longer game to get through. I stopped having fun after the first 3 playthroughs, and every replay after that for the review just felt like homework. So with that, I'm going to give Mega Man DOS3 a rating of 1 out of 10. Awful. And that's the end of this video. If you like what you saw, consider giving a like and subscribe to my channel. Leave a comment if you have something to say. And as per usual, my Discord server, DeMontropolis, is in the description. Consider joining if you're new to the channel. As we're nearing October, I figure I begin preparation for a Mega Man 2 weapon guide at the start of the month. Since it's the spooky month, it'll also be appropriate for a new Castlevania review. Those who stuck around for the last game should already know which game it is. And with that said, I'll be signing off. Take care, folks.